Hello and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. This is a program about things seen out of the corner of one's eye, about what might be lurking in the shadows, about the strange experiences that people have. In effect, this is a program about the nature of reality, what it is and what it isn't. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Hall, and with me, as usual, is another familiar co-host, Dave Jinks. Dave, how are you doing?
I am great, Dan. This is going to be a good show. I know it already.
Yeah, me too. Let me congratulate you and Sarah, our other partner who's not with us today, on your interview with Calvin Parker. That was very interesting. Got to listen to that.
Yeah, he's got a
Back,
great story. That was fun to listen to. I'm sure Dr. Taff here is going to have many great stories, and I'm looking
yeah.
forward to that.
So in 1982, I went to the movies, as I recall, and the movie that I went to see was something called The Entity. And what drew me to that movie probably was Barbara Hershey to some degree, because I had kind of a crush on her. And then just the nature of the story, a woman being attacked by some kind of physical, unseen force. And we're fortunate on today's broadcast to have the chief investigator of that particular incident, Dr. Barry Taff, to tell us about the case and his work in the field of parapsychology. So, Dr. Taft, let me welcome you to the program.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. I'm happy that you've called me to be on your show.
Sure. Well, we're happy to have you. Kind of one place I want to start here, and then, of course, Dave will chime in wherever he wants to. I used to work in a community college setting. I was an adjunct teacher in the social sciences division. I taught sociology and political science, and of course, the psychology people were in that same division. And they knew of my interests in things that were kind of strange. And so I remember asking them one time, so what do you think as a psychology? And these are like master's level folks. What do you think of the discipline of parapsychology? And they essentially laughed at me. Now, that's what you have done for a living. So, what would you tell somebody who says, well, parapsychology is just a pseudoscience?
Well, first of all, it it's sort of like whatever people aren't afraid of, whatever they don't really understand, they're usually frightened of. Religious dogma, conditioning when they were young, lack of exposure. When ancient humans saw incredible meteorological events, they were terrified because they thought God was angry when it come down and destroy them. Well, we know different right now. God may be involved with everything, but God doesn't fire lightning bolts down to kill somebody because they've been bad, as far as we know.
Mhm.
What's unique about parapsychology is the data collected is quite impressive, and the work I've done in my career and others like Lloyd Auerbach, like Dr. Andrew Nichols, like there's really famous Stanley Krippner and Monty Ullman and all these really great people that have done great work over the decades. But a lot of times the work is focused on doing the same experiments over and over, trying to get a statistically significant result. Look, see here. I'm going to go back to something that the late Stanton Friedman used to say. He said,
Stan,
"How
yes.
you only need one UFO to prove there's a UFO. How many UFOs do you need? If one isn't one of our machines and isn't from another country or whatever, well then, what is it? Why is it? What's it doing here? And where is it from?" And it's again, let's look at the analogy to ufology. Um, the phenomena described in ufology goes back quite a while, long before humans ever took to the air by any method. And the vehicles were loud and noisy and did things that people could only have night terrors about. But it happened, been reported throughout time. And another good example, quickly, is in 1917, there was something called the Miracle of Our Lady of Fatima, or the Miracle of the Sun. They even made a movie about it called The Miracle of Our Lady of Fatima with Gilbert Roland, and it was a really well-made film. And the whole premise was that the strange apparitions being seen in this cova in Fatima, Portugal, that it was a Marian apparition. They were seeing this, and the end result, after all these three kids, what they experienced, the 70,000 people congregated, and it was pouring rain, and suddenly the clouds opened, and this spinning source of energy started descending, and the people went crazy because they thought it was the end of the world. They were panicking, obviously. Who wouldn't? And it got closer and closer, and what's really odd, there were some pictures taken of it. And guess what you see when you look at the picture? A silver disc that's rotating.
Ah.
In 1970? No. So the phenomenon is described back then could only be interpreted as a religious manifestation of God or whatever. And now, in modern terms, or modern, understanding, we look at it very differently. The whole thing is bizarre, and the question of where we are with regard to our understanding of reality. When I worked at UCLA, the professors I worked with were all my parents' age. They were, much older than me, and to almost a person, most of them became terrified of being around me. And I went, why? Well, they said they were scared of me. I go, well, look at all these things. I was studied as a psychic. That's how I first got involved with Dr. Thelma Moss back in 1969. And leading up to meeting her, I could repeatedly send her letters. She never responded. I called her office. The switchboard picked up. She never responded, so I gave up. So there was a graduate student when I was in college who I met who worked with Dr. Moss. Through him, I was set up to meet Dr. Moss at her home in Beverly Hills, which was really close to where I lived with my parents. And I went over to her home, very nice house, and I knew nothing about Dr. Moss other than the parapsychological research he'd already done. Remember, this is spring of 1969, so bear in mind the time frame. I was 20 years old, 20, whatever, something like that. So I'm telling her a lot of things I've experienced, telepathic, clairvoyant, precognitive, blah, blah, blah. She goes, can you read people? Can you do psychometry? I go, yeah, okay. She threw me her keys, and I rattled off some names, and one turned out to be her deceased husband. I didn't know anything about her. And then I said, I see a fat, blue-eyed blonde woman named Shelley who's always screaming. Well, that was Dr. Moss's best friend, the actress Shelley Winters.
Oh, Shelley
Winters. An accurate, if not unflattering, description of her. And, okay, so that's how I met Dr. Moss. So they were studying me. They did a formal study. It was published in a medical journal in the mid-1970s. Okay, but these academicians who were around me, all who were very well educated and intelligent and articulate, they began freaking out around me of what I might pick up around them or what I might see or what I might tell them. And what I've learned is what makes people unique is how we perceive the world we live in. So if you're a famous actor, famous director, a famous writer, a poet, a musician, a scientist, or an astronaut, whatever. You're famous because you're doing something that few other people do, and you're good at it, and you get applauded for it. That's normal. But when what you do is different than how other people gain fame, it's not that acceptable. In fact, people become terrified of being around you because they don't know what you're going to say and how they can deal with it. And so anyway, these academicians who were working with me, and these were psychologists, they were medical doctors, they were sociologists, and a couple of them said that they thought I was an alien. And I don't mean from another country, I mean another world.
Another planet.
And I said to them, look, hey guys and ladies, have you ever met an alien? No. I don't know what an alien's like. Well, I go, well, what? You're speaking illogically, irrationally here. What are you talking about? But I go, but what? That didn't change their regard with regard to me as being frightened. I'm going I don't get it. But this is, until something happens to a skeptic that knocks them off their feet, they tend to maintain that level of skepticism. But that's the way humans are. Between something they don't understand, which is frightening, and they don't believe it never happened to them. Uh-oh.
You're
Getting
getting me to
feedback.
think about your experiences as a young person. Could you share a little bit about when you first noticed that you had some abilities that others did not, and how that was received by people your age and your parents?
Okay, well, let's start back when I was in the fifth grade. I was 10 years old, and I'm playing at recess in the courtyard with some people, some kids, other kids. And this little girl named Christine, blue-eyed blonde hair, uh, is walking towards me, and I knew who she was. I knew nothing about her. And I'm looking at her, and this extraordinary vision I had popped on. And the best way to describe it is X-ray vision, but it's in full color. And I could see that under her dress, the sky blue dress with a flower in the upper left corner, and I could see a strange tube going into her right side and a plastic bag strapped to her.
Mm.
And thought, what's that? So I went up to her and I said, Christine, what's that weird tube and bag under your dress? And she went nuts, and she ran in and got the teacher. She dragged me in the principal's office. So, did you sneak in the girls' bathroom, or did you look under her dress? I go, I did neither. He goes, then how could you? I Turns out she had a colonoscopy,
Colostomy, right?
colostomy bag. I didn't know that. I was 10 years old, and I told him I could do it, and he's screaming and yelling at me, going to have me thrown out of school, have me evicted and arrested and expelled from school. So I'm looking at him. I said, well, it's like that appendix scar you had that never healed properly, and for appendicitis, now I call it a keloid. I didn't know that word back then. I told that to him, and he turned purple and green and red, and said, I'm calling your mom. Okay. Calls my mom. My mom says to him, he explains what's going on, and my mom says to him, he can do this. He went, what? He can do this. Do what? He can look through people and diagnose them. Huh? Yeah. Okay. And my mom said, I don't want to talk about it. They were terrified of it. So, principal said to me, if we ever hear of this happening again, we will have you thrown out of school. And so it did happen, but I never spoke of it again.
Right.
Now, this was in grammar school or elementary school. Then we bump up to junior high school. There was a girl named Helene, taller than me, but everybody was taller than me. She had medium dark brown hair, big blue eyes, and she was actually cute. Every time she got near me, even if I didn't know it, I'd pass out.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, what's this? And turned out she didn't have a colostomy bag. She was epileptic. When I'm around
Oh.
people who are epileptic, I get dizzy and I pass out.
Yeah.
Um, Being a medical intuitive, in the new book I'm writing, there's an entire chapter on me being a medical intuitive and the problems it's caused. And like I said not long ago, that if you're different in a different way than others are, what makes you unique, people don't beat a path to your door. They're terrified of you.
Mm-hmm.
There was a song came out in 1962 called "He's a Rebel." I just played it last night. I haven't heard it in decades by the Crystals, and the lyrics are somewhat relevant to me because if you don't do what everyone else does, you do something on your own, and it's unlike what everyone else does, and people are upset from that. People, they run away from you. It's hard to keep friends, hard to keep relationships, and most of the people I grew up with, I don't even know anymore. Only maybe two or three people. When I started popping up on television in the 70s and in the newspapers and magazines, and they say you're different, but you're weird. That's why you're different. And so the medical thing so years later, my mom comes to me. She says, hey, Barry, look, Dad's got a problem. My dad, her husband. Let's see if you can tell me what it is. I said, is it visibly discernible? And she went, no. So I sat next to him. I did my thing. I said, well, you're okay, but you have a hiatal hernia. My mom went, you guessed. I said, I only said one thing. Not two things, not three things, not 20 things. I said one thing, and that's it. Moving forward a little bit, I'm telling you, a lot of this will be in the new book, but This
Yeah.
is what, but also I could close my eyes and I could see friends even though they were miles away, like I was next to them. I could see what was going on in my mind, like my eyes were there moving around. So let's jump to 1973. I'm working at the lab. I was halfway through my doctorate, my PhD education, and I met this really stunning girl in the lab. We were having a little seminar, and her name was Carol, and she looked like a young, short Shirley MacLaine, really cute. So, long story long. Well, first thing happened is she was dating a married man, and she figured he'd divorce his wife and marry her. But that didn't happen because there was a lot of sexual tension between us. And then, okay, so we ended up finally dating. She got rid of the older guy, and she made a mistake by deciding to see me. At one point, we're in a place and we're talking, and I said, "Oh, Carol, you got a little tumor here," and I so pointed to her, like on her left breast, right here. She goes, "What do you mean a tumor?" I said, "It's a tumor." I
Hmm.
said, "Don't worry, it's benign." She goes, "How can you see that?" I said, "There's no calcium around it. It's benign." What? I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear it. So, no, she finished her degree and she got a job at a major company, and she had to have insurance, if full physical for insurance purposes, and they found the lump where I said it would be. Did a biopsy. It was a benign tumor. They took it out. So that was starting to freak her out, and she said, "I don't know if I could deal with you. You're scaring the hell out of me. I'm afraid I'll come home from work and we'll be together somewhere, and God knows, little tidbit of knowledge you'll tell me about myself that I don't want to know about." I said, "But I helped," because I don't want that type of help. Oh, so the relationship kept going for a while. And then the last thing we did was I took her to see The Exorcist on opening night in 1973 at the National Theater in Westwood. Now,
Perfect
I
date.
already had met, yeah, well, for me, I already met Blatty and Friedkin because they came to the lab when the show was in development and early production. And that's a whole other story. But so the movie starts. In the first act, you see Linda Blair on her bed being bounced around. Not the really intense stuff hasn't started, but the bed's bouncing around like a carnival. And I turned to Carol in the theater, and I've got a loud projector voice even then. And I said, "Oh, I've seen a bed do that at a house in Hollywood." In this dead quiet theater, a voice booms out, "Hey, Barry, is that you?"
Wow.
And Carol was like really freaking. My girlfriend, I can't take this. I go, "It's a movie." I go, "It's real." I go, "It's a movie. Get over it. You're in a theater with hundreds of other people." Yeah, okay, okay. So that's. Oh, and what preceded all of this was when we were trying to develop a relationship when she was seeing a married man. Um, I laid down one night to go to sleep because we had not even been together yet romantically. We just talked. And I was laying down on my left side alone in my own bed, in my own bedroom, in my own apartment. She wasn't there. And I suddenly feel the covers going up. I see a body pressing into me that's female. I go, "Huh?" And an arm comes over me, and I turn, there's nothing there. And then the phone rings a few minutes later. This was about 2 in the morning. And the phone rings. And she goes, "What did you do?" I go, "What?" She says, I found myself getting into bed with you. You moved. Oh, I put my arm around you. You moved, and then I woke up, and I found myself back in my place.
Hmm.
Oh, I don't know. Uh, it's my life is sort of like this.
Well,
I found,
what I'm thinking about as I'm listening to this is the social, what's the term I want to use? The social impact on you
stigma.
as a young person.
Well, I mean, this is who and what I am. I can't change it who and what I
Yeah,
am.
true.
And my parents just tolerated me. Um, they never, they didn't know how to think of me. Every time I popped up on TV, starting in the 70s and going on, they were embarrassed. to have to tell their friends, "Oh, that's Barry. Look what he's on TV about." You didn't become a medical doctor. You didn't become a dentist. You didn't become a lawyer, God forbid. You know, they just didn't want to hear it, and so it's I can't change who and what I am. This is who and what I did, and now in life there are things called synchronicities, things where things are linked causally in a way we don't yet understand. And the reason I bring this up is this is about the time where they started with me with one other human being on Earth. Okay, let me back up the story. In March of 1963, an episode of the original Twilight Zone, one of the hour episodes aired, called Death Ship, starring Ross Martin and Jack Klugman. I was really impressed with that show, with the writing and story. It was incredible. And I remembered who wrote it. Richard Matheson, who wrote Legend of Hell House, who wrote Somewhere in Time, who wrote a whole bunch of television shows. Very, very gifted writer. So that was a man who wrote that episode of the Twilight Zone. And so I thought, how am I going to meet the guy? I'm like, I'm 14 years old. I'll forget about it. 10 years later to the day, who walks in the lab? Richard Matheson and his son, Richard Christian Matheson. And this is where the weirdness began. They're both tall. Richard's tall. His father was even taller than he was. Richard and I became friends, did some work together. We discovered we both had the same birth date, month, day, and time, but he's 4 years younger than me. Okay, so this is on my website. It'll also be in my new book. The synchronization of our birth was rather bizarre. So let's see, where to begin? We were friends. Other things kept popping up, but he got really locked up in writing and producing, which he still does very successfully. And we lost track of each other a long time ago. But then in about 2005, we contacted each other again through a series of other people we knew. And we met for lunch in Westwood. And so, okay, now, I had a Toyota Supra Turbo. That was my last car. And Richard had a Lexus SC300, I think, gold. Our license plate differed by only one number. Oh, that could have been coincidence. Okay, so we're having lunch, and I've always liked watches. They've never run well on me, ever. They stop or they run fast. And so we're sitting there. I sold my Rolex years earlier because it never ran well on me. So I wasn't even wearing a watch. But the only watch I wanted, the only watch, was a Tag Heuer Curium class watch. Very expensive. And I didn't feel like spending the money because it won't work anyway. So what is Richard wearing, Richard Christian Matheson wearing, the exact watch, make, and model I want? Of course, his parents bought it for him when they were traveling in Europe. I mean, come on, there's thousands of different watches. Oh, it could have been coincidence. Okay. Then we discovered that when I used to surf a lot when I was younger. And remember, I was body surfing because you only surf till a certain time in the morning, and they make you bring your board in because there's too many people in the water. And so I remember I was body surfing and got sucked under by a riptide, and I was drowning, and I felt my lungs fill with water, and I blacked out. And well, that's it. I guess I'm dead. And then I suddenly found myself standing in about 2.5 feet of water, and I had no idea how I got there. Oh, and there's no one around me. I'm going, well, what happened? Did I black out and have an hallucination? The same event happened to Richard at the same beach 4 years later.
Oh my gosh.
And then discovered, okay, my mother's name was Ruth. Her middle name was Anne. Richard's mother's name was Ruth. Her middle name was Anne. Okay. Richard's father, the Richard Matheson, passed away in 2013. I got a call about it. It was terrible, and I thought, why is this date significant? It was his father passed away on my father's birthday. And the last thing, some years ago, I had to go have a bunch of moles removed from my body, one above the navel, one around each side of the thorax or ribcage area, and one in the back, forming a perfect, like a circular line around the middle of your body. The same day, going to a different dermatologist, not knowing where I was going and why would he? He had moles removed to the
Oh
same
my
part
gosh.
of his body.
That's amazing.
I don't know. What does it mean? I have no idea. But my life is filled with these sort of things.
Mm.
Some people ignore them. I don't. I find I'm intrigued. Recently, go ahead. You had a question?
Well, yeah, this is Dave again. I want to
Yeah.
jump in here, and um, Dan's original question was, there's a stigma attached to parapsychology or any study of something that's outside the so-called mainstream, which puts you at a big disadvantage. But what you're telling us here is that not only were you at that disadvantage, but you also yourself had some of these abilities, which kind of puts you behind, even further in terms
Right.
of evoking fear in those around you and people unwilling to work with you, and which I totally get, because are you going to read my mind and tell me my darkest
But see,
thoughts?
right.
But
It's
so
very
you're behind the
significant.
eight ball twice,
Right.
and
I'm behind the right. 16 ball.
yeah. So I mean, the answer to that is that
Yeah.
yes, you have dealt with a lot of pushback. And
Okay.
before I forget, I just wanted to ask, do you have a feel for how many researchers who end up in, again, say parapsychology or study of psychic phenomena or PK, or some of these sort of fringe, for lack of a better term, areas? What percentage of those researchers do you think are actually in the same boat that you are in terms of having some of these physical abilities themselves? Do you think it's
Most
a low percentage, high?
most parapsychologists get into it because of curiosity, not because they've had these a lifelong history of these things happening. But let me explore with regard to what you just said. There was when I got my doctorate 44 years ago. Wow. I sent out lots of letters to get employment as a psychophysiologist or biomedical engineer. That was my formal education. And so I didn't hear anything. Snail mail, no email, no social media. Months and months went by. Well, I guess they didn't want me. And then a few responses trickled back, and they almost were verbatim. They all said the same thing. They said, "You have a lot of damn nerve expecting us to hire you." What? Well, you'd create a hostile work environment, scare the hell out of people. They'd be frightened. They'd be distracted from their job. They'd want to talk to you. They'd be afraid to be in a room with you. And we could never hire. And also, but now remember, I'd already been on INLA twice and on Two in the Town in Los Angeles, TV shows. And then I was in the LA Times several times. I hit the Daily Berlin 3 or 4 times. I hit the cover review LA Monthly once. So I get in a lot of media exposure, and I thought, but it was all serious. I mean, I got one of the things I did for ABC. Even got nominated for an Emmy for doing, but I didn't win. But that's not the point. The point is that all this media exposure served to put me in a really bad place, and we're not going to hire you. Why? Because first of all, we don't believe in this, but second of all, you're famous for lunacy, for being crazy.
So what time was this? Was this the what time period? Because I know during
this is the mid 1970s.
Yeah, there was. That's when the Dan and I were talking about this before the show. The CIA or the FBI, I can never remember. It's been a long time since I've looked into it. Did the psychic program? Can't remember the code name, but they concluded that it became public that psychics were being employed or at least studied by the intelligence apparatus, Stargate. That's right. Yeah. And was it around this time when it was kind of seeping into the public eye, so to speak, that you were making these appearances? I mean, was that kind of
Yep,
coincide with that, those
yep.
revelations?
It was just as much political incorrectness then as it'd be now.
Right.
Possibly more now because of social media. But
Yeah.
giving you a current example that takes in my whole past. So, okay, I am the co-owner of a number of patented medical devices. Nothing to do with the paranormal. They're just medical devices. So we wrote up a business plan, an executive summary. We sent it out, and a lot of people, if they don't already know you and you have already made a lot of money, they're not going to help you. But we got it to a common friend, to a big multinational company that makes everything, electronics, automotive technology, medical device, I mean, everything. So the second guy, head of development, uh, product development, he read our business plan and was very impressed. And so, okay, he said he'd push it upstairs to the right people and that you'll hear back from us. And so weeks went by and weeks went by and months went by and more months went by and nothing. So finally, out of curiosity, I put in a phone call, an email and a phone call, and still no response. More months later, I finally hear from someone up on the top. And all I can say is what he said. He said, your business plan is garbage. There's no evidence you've done any clinical event work whatsoever. And I looked at the patents, they're indecipherable crap. I don't know how anyone allowed you to patent this nonsense. And I said, sir, what are you talking about? I said, look, you're lying. Just stop. Just tell me the truth. What's going on? I already had a feeling of what it was. Just tell me the truth. He said, okay, you want the truth? I'll give it to you. The truth is that I looked you up, and between the ghosts and the paranormal and the ESP and the aliens and the UFOs, you're nuts. I saw who you were. We threw your thing. We destroyed your business plan. And that
Yeah.
was that. But at least, he was lying. And then I said, tell me the truth. And he did. So at least we got some honesty. But so we have a new business plan, and my name is no longer connected with it.
Would be associated.
But my name is still on the patent.
Uh-huh.
And when we get new patents, better, more evolved versions of the same devices, my name will not be on them because it's suicide.
Hmm.
And like I said, if some of these devices are already gotten on the market, made a lot of money for the investors, then you're eccentric. You're not crazy. But until you've made a lot of money for anyone, people just think you're crazy when you're into this. And this is the norm. This is how the world works.
Yeah.
And of course, the last 20 some odd years of the fraudulent, the paranormal unreality shows have made it much worse because all this they've been talking about it's all faked. It's all fraudulent work to get a show done. Something's got to happen. Well, if it doesn't, you got to make it happen, or pretend like it happened, or have sufficiently crazy people on the show to where they're more interested in a ghost would be if you got it with a holographic laser camera. And we were visited when I was working at the lab. We repeatedly visited by members of DIA, CIA, DLI, ONI, all these groups, and all of the think tanks, the biggest of the big. And initially, I didn't even know who they were because they showed up in civilian clothing. Some women, a few women, and some mostly men, but we didn't know who they were. And we demonstrated what we're able to do. And they were this is like the early 70s. They were very impressed. So they were willing to fund us to do a far more elaborate study. And okay, well, we would have been interested in doing it, but UCLA and the old Neuropsychiatric Institute would not get politically linked with us because it would have been political suicide.
Right.
So it left us and it went up to Stanford Research Institute. And they did the same thing, but they did it a little differently than us. They had to change some of the terminology, arose by any other name. But in my website, barrytaff.net, there's a lengthy article called Learned Psi, Training to be Psychic. And it's all about these groups we were having at UCLA. And my thinking was that if you could reinforce somebody who already had some ability, innate, inherent ability, reinforce them positively reinforce them through a proper learning paradigm when they're accurately perceiving information, telepathic, precognitive, that theoretically they would learn right from wrong in their own mind and their abilities would become honed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it proved out to be true. We were blown away. We went 1970 through, we closed at 1978. We went off campus until 1986 or 7, and then they fell apart. Everyone scattered. But we found that in a way, we learned a lot. Things we expected to learn, we didn't. Everything we didn't think would ever occur did. And it's not like we had thousands of these sessions, not dozens, but thousands. This is discussed on my website. And the bottom line with all this is humans, under the right conditions, are able to remotely access information through space, meaning wherever it is, or through time. And depending on where you are when you perceive the event, relative to where the information comes from, will determine what we call it. So if it's from the past, we call that retrocognition. If it's from the future, we call that precognition. If it's from a distance without another mind intervening, that's clairvoyance. If it's mind to mind, that's telepathic, or the generic term of remote viewing. It's all the same. And it was amazing that we found that some people were really good at this, and most people weren't. It's sort of like we can all drive a car, but few, if any of us, would ever be able to race like at Le Mans or F1, Formula One, because you would have the hand-eye foot coordination, the depth perception, just many parameters that you may not correlate with to drive that intense of a car. And but some people they jump into it and it's like a second home. Well, look what I can do. The same thing with your pilot. Some pilots are really great and others aren't. But what we learned, we got to the point where the real-time telepathic stuff or clairvoyant was so easy to do that we got bored with it. Because, okay, it's like been there, done that. Let's, okay. So a couple of things happened which really shook us up and caused some of our regulars to walk away from the program. There was an instance in, let me think, what was this, there was an instance where this director, name isn't relevant, brought this well-known actor, I can't use his name even though he's deceased because I can't, to the group. Everyone recognized him because he was really well-known, a character actor, TV, movies, everything. So he gave us a target, and it was clearly a woman's name. And we're rattling off this information in a controlled environment, sensory-deprived environment. And I remember I've at least once said, wait a minute, is this a man or a woman? What is this? Who is this person? A man or... It was a transsexual. This is like in the mid-'70s.
Mm-hmm.
So the light came on, and the actor jumped up and left the room, never to return. Another time, there was a girl who worked in the lab as a volunteer. She's now almost a retired psychiatrist. Anyway, she threw out her name, a first name, and we barely knew her, let alone who she knew. So we're describing. I keep trying to pronounce a word phonetically. Okay, we describe a beautiful home, a lot of foliage, like for the forest, in the really stunning environment. All big glass walls, and the kitchen was lined with empty jars of Bako bits. Weird. And we described the house in detail. Okay. And then we got on the fact that he had been viciously beaten and mugged. Okay, so the feedback portion of the group comes back, and the girl grabs the control of the recorder, and she stops it. The guy's name was Hormel. He was the Hormel meat guy, the king of the Hormel thing. Okay, The house was we actually described the house, the empty jars of bagel bits lining the kitchen. Okay, but and then I said, well, we got to the point of him being mugged. She goes, no, no, he's never been mugged and beaten. What are you talking about? A couple of days later, a call comes in from this girl who was at our group, and she said, remember the other night what you did? Yeah. Well, remember what you said? Yeah. Well, I just found out that my friend at that exact time was being viciously beaten and
Oh,
mugged
gosh.
up in San Francisco.
Hmm.
But she didn't know it. So these type of things happened a lot. In the early period of the groups, we were visited by, I told you, by these DIA and ONI, all these different military and intelligence groups. And one of the things they did, they gave us a name or something to focus on because recording it. And I think one other person started describing something that in essence was an Ohio class sub, the Trident missile submarine, the boomers, SLBMs, and in great detail. And I was getting to all this nuancing, the detailing of the technology. They were so upset by it because it was classified, because they had a long way from actually completing and launching these boats. They demanded we surrender the tape. Of course, we did, because we were a little too accurate. But it became easy to do this. It was no big deal. Like everything in this area, occasionally we would all be too fatigued. Like for example, if there was Santa Ana winds blowing, that produces positive ions. That would produce irritability, and our sensitivities would diminish. During the full moon, the same thing. Sensitivities seem to diminish. But we got tired doing the real time thing, so I said, let's see the future. So the last session of one of our groups was a Wednesday night. We said, okay, describe the next week's first target. Could be anyone, man, woman, young, old, couldn't be too young. And we just started describing a tall, blue-eyed blonde woman, very, very strikingly beautiful. Described her clothing, a beige pants outfit, really professional looking. And each chair in the room had a number under it. No one could see. She sat in one. We described her sitting in one particular chair with a certain number. We see a three-story home in the Hollywood Hills, baby grand piano, other stuff. Okay, we rattled this off, and then a number of us, including me, described a tall man, all wearing black hat, black shirt, black pants, black boots, black belt, black mask, black cape, and an imposing sword. And the girl, and we recorded this, and we don't know what we're saying. Okay. So the next week rolls around, and new people came in that had never been there before, didn't know any of the regulars that had been in the last three sessions, because you want to make sure they're bringing in ringers to lie about what's going on. So new people came in through third parties. Each new person, when entering the room, was given a sealed envelope with a piece of paper and a number on it. We then would go in the room. We would throw the dice. Number would come up, and then we said, okay, open your packets, and whoever's number fits the number on the dice, you're the target. And this woman said, oh, it's mine. Okay? Now, we had forgot what we said a week earlier. Come on, it was a week ago. Long time. So she's controlling the recorder, playing it back. We told her, if it's accurate regarding you or your immediate surround, you'll know it. You stop and give us feedback. If not, you don't respond. Okay. We described her perfectly, exactly. Even her clothing was correct. Of her own accord, she sat in one of 21 free chairs in that room she could have. We didn't tell her where to sit because it didn't matter, except the one where I had the controls. But she sat in the one number chair we said she would, but she didn't know that because the numbers were on the bottom. Okay. Then the three-story house in the Hollywood Hills, that's where she grew up. Baby grand piano, of course. But the real thing, the real test of all this came when we saw the tall man in black clothing, in the black garb, and the sword, and the cape, and the mask, and every black boots, and everything. And she looks at me. I could see this in my head today as if it was happened last night. She said, "How do you know who I am?" And I went, "What?" She says, "How do you know who I am?" And I go, "What are you talking about? What do you mean who you are? Do you know who I am?" "No, I'm Tony Williams." And I went, "And?" "My father played Zorro for Disney."
Wow. Oh
"What?"
my gosh.
She goes, "Wait a minute. I didn't know I was coming here till a couple hours ago, and you chose me through a random process. So, but how could you know this a week? But wait, when was this tape made? A week ago. I didn't know I was coming here till a few hours ago, and I was chosen by random, from more than 12 people." Yep.
So that was
Well,
Guy Williams's daughter.
pardon? That was, yeah, correct.
Yeah, Guy Williams's daughter, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Well,
and
you
she didn't get it, and I said, "Hey, we're doing it. We don't get it. All we know is it works, and when it's accurate, it's deadly accurate."
right, and
You
I
know,
want to hear more. Definitely want to hear more details. I got a list of questions here. I could probably give you 100
sure. Go
questions.
ahead.
I'll narrow it to
Well,
fewer.
Dave,
But
Dave,
but
go ahead and ask a question, and then I'd like to have
well,
Barry talk about the
I
entity case.
I was going to say I want to what I want to get to eventually is the characteristics surrounding these abilities, because I think whether you're calling it psychokinesis or ESP or just psi, the general term, there seems to be some set of characteristics that amplify the ability, and Barry kind of hinted at that. And
Yeah.
but anyway, I want to get into those details. However, I know that Dan is dying to hear
Okay.
more about the entity, because that's
Well,
what
actually,
brought him
before I
to
talk about
this.
the entity case, it's
Hmm.
better that a precursor we answer your question because it'll logically lead into the entity case. See, this is okay.
Okay.
We know now. Okay, let me give you an example. When you have a DVD in your hand of a new movie, you want to watch it. Well,
Mhm.
what do you need? Well, you need the DVD player, you need the TV, you need a remote. The TV and the player must be plugged in the wall. You got to put the DVD in the player. You got to turn it on, and you got to watch it. If any part of the ensemble isn't there, you don't see images on your television. Now
Right.
let's relate that to the physical phenomena, the psychokinesis. There's the microscopic type, which would be like affecting random number generators, random event generators. Okay. Then
Right.
there's the macroscopic, which we call poltergeist activity or recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. Now, what we now know, and the data is so consistent, it's astounding. After close to 5,000 cases, okay, this is what the evidence suggests. It suggests that some people, act as biological operational amplifiers,
Hmm.
waveguides, and focal planes. And these people have an extremely high sensitivity to electromagnetic and geomagnetic fields, and electromagnetic and geomagnetic fields. And most of them, if not all, tend to be either seizure prone or have temporal lobe epilepsy. And when they take the medication to quell the seizures, the phenomenon stops. But here's the real kicker. While the majority of poltergeist agents tend to be epileptic, even seizure, it could be just seizure prone or major focal seizures, the
Hmm.
majority of people who are epileptic are not poltergeist agents, which means that somewhere in the middle there's a missing or unknown variable. And it could be that the individuals might also lack the proper mechanisms for dealing with stress. Their coping mechanisms are very poor. But over the years, you go out on cases, and this is years ago on a case in West Covina. The woman was there, and she told the story. They found a fixer-upper, her and her husband and daughter. They fixed the place up. Long story short, all this stuff goes on. This will be in the books. I don't want to go into the new book. I don't want to go into too much detail. But the husband basically went kind of crazy and tried to kill her and the daughter, and they took him away, and they don't know what happened to him. They don't understand what happened, but he calmed down. So they brought him back home, and okay, it's fine. And suddenly, out of the blue, he pulls out a gun and kills himself in the dining room, exactly where the original owner of the house killed himself 45 years earlier, which of course they didn't know about. But then the woman's going on describing the phenomena, the luminous anomalies, disembodied voices, banging noises, objects being moved around, tables shaking, classic poltergeist events. And she said, she says, there's something else popped up that was really weird. I suddenly became epileptic. Is that relevant? And I go, yep, very relevant.
Definitely.
And it's amazing. It's like I said, the faces and places may change, but the events do not. And the correlations to these somatic problems seem to be very consistent. And so theoretically, we would be able to artificially trigger these events, making them happen when we want. But the risks would be severe because by doing it, you could actually trigger seizures in people. I mean, in when you do an EEG, there's something called photic driving. They put a flashing strobe light in front of your closed eyes. It drives the brain to produce certain types of responses. Well, we know what that is. There may be something equivalent here, but instead of using light, you use ultra-low frequency magnetic field. And you might eventually get to the point where you know what's going on. But even more so, we now know enough that we could take poltergeist agents and we could have them have positron emission tomography scans and CT scans and PET scans, CT scans, and functional MRIs. And we might get real answers. But the doctors involved would lose their jobs and the hospital might lose its license.
Right. Well, I'd like to.
There is the problem. Now, with that, let's go into the entity case. It was August 22nd.
Let me plug your wait, Barry, before you do. Let me plug your book first because Dan and I have both read Aliens Above, Ghosts Below: Explorations of the Unknown, and I have to say I've read hundreds of books, not covering UFOs, aliens, ancient archaeology, etc., ghosts. And I have to say, you have managed to cram more information in one. What is this? It's only a little over 200 pages, one 200-page book. And I am impressed that you were able to get that much information. And I have to admit, I was shocked how many anecdotes. Well, I don't like that term. I like the term report because they're scientific reports as far as I'm concerned. In that single book, that could change anybody's mind going through that, realizing how common, how prevalent really these sorts of situations can be. So there's plenty of data to be out there to be analyzed. It's just that we have to look at it and we have to see if we can get a handle on it, and that's what you try to do in this book. And I appreciate that. So I do recommend Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. That was published, when was it? It was
2011, I think.
2011. Yeah. And so
I don't even know if it's still in print because, I mean, it sold well, but it didn't, without being a celebrity who's on TV all the time, most people aren't going to know you enough to buy your book. I mean, I got good responses, except I should say one woman said, she said she loved it, but why don't you keep mentioning all these beautiful girls you knew? I said, because phenomena happened related to them. Who cares about who I knew and who I dated, who I was around? I don't care. They don't care. Big deal. Only reason is because extraordinarily profound events transpired.
I think that
if it wasn't for that, who cares?
There's got to be a connection, and that's one of my questions too. I don't know. Should I throw out the questions? You said they would be a good prelude to the entity case. Do you think I should?
Right.
Let me just throw the ones out at you. I wanted to know. You talked about micro PK.
The microscopic PK.
And that, I assume, means sort of in the Dean Radin realm with the eggs, the random number generators, the Princeton lab.
Right. Exactly.
And I was lucky enough to visit the Princeton lab. It's been 10 or more years. I think they folded years ago. But I was able to visit there. It was very interesting. I was excited to get in there. But you're talking about, that statistical stuff. I do recommend anyone interested in that side, look into the Dean Radin, the Pear Lab, you'll see all that, and it's enough to convince you that something is going on. But I do also understand what you're saying, in that statistically, it's not as interesting as the macro stuff.
Macros, of course not.
And
Now,
most
see,
people be more interested in the macro stuff, but I'm a scientific numbers guy, and I
mhm,
thought that was really interesting to
mhm.
see that huge body of work. I'm also interested
Now,
in the
see, and
per,
the
hmm
singularly most important bit of information when you get into the poltergeist things and the macroscopic PK is this:
yeah,
when energy in our world does work, the energy we know of, it produces heat as a byproduct. It's that law, one of the laws of thermodynamics.
right,
Yet when macroscopic PK does it, not only does the environment not get hot, it gets cold all too often.
So
So that means we're looking at a force of nature that is not nuclear, that is not gravitational, that is not strong or weak nuclear, say, not electromagnetic. It might mimic those in some way, but it isn't. They can affect it, but it isn't. But
hmm
long before big objects would fly around like toys, the person, if they were generating this, they'd be burned up from heat and ionization.
yeah,
Yet
yeah.
it doesn't happen. So what is that telling us about the nature of the phenomenon? It's amazing. This could change our future in ways we can't imagine.
And
seems
This is
like
what it's all
was,
about.
seems like what you're describing is a cold spot. Many psychic investigations, ghost hunters always complain of cold spots. So
Right.
you're really describing a mechanism by where that would happen, how that would happen.
Well, not a mechanism. A lot of
The
times we
result.
can't measure the environment, but it could be. They know that strong magnetic field can cause the hair on our bodies to become erect, to stand up. It's called pilo or something, erection, I forget what it's called.
yeah,
And this is caused by the magnetic field. This may be a precursor to the phenomenon. In other words, in order for these things to occur in a certain environment, you need a unique geomagnetic and or electromagnetic field that basically irritates the central nervous system of the individuals involved, what I call inductive resonance coupling. So after all said and done, if the energy, the parameters of the environment are in resonance with the poltergeist agent, voila, things happen. If
Mhm.
they're not, they don't.
Tell us about Doris Bither, who was
Right,
the name,
right,
the actual person
right,
in the entity
right.
case.
We met her on, was it July? I think it was August or July or August 22nd of 1974. So how it happened was that my colleague at the time, Carrie Gaynor, was in a bookshop at Westwood, which we actually filmed there for the entity. It's not the only thing accurate about the movie. And Doris, with one of her friends, heard Carrie and his friend talking about her work. So she said, "My house is haunted. Okay, let me get your name and number, and we'll give you a call." So okay, we came out there a few days later. It was August. I think it was August 22nd. I'm pretty sure 1974, and it was really hot and real humid. And we walked into her place, and it felt like you were in a toaster oven. It was horrible, hot and air, and humid beyond belief. The house had a disgusting stench of decomposing organic matter and or human urine. And we were talking to her, and one of the first things she says was, "Oh, that I've been repeatedly raped by a ghost." And I went, "Oh God!" I put my head in my hand, going, "Woman's psychotic. She needs to see a psychiatrist. We don't deal with it." We listen to her stories and blah blah blah. Okay, look, we think your experience is beyond our area of expertise. We want to refer you to these people. Okay, which she didn't respond too well to. And she was somewhat evasive and cryptic in her responses in terms of asking her questions. I would ask like what her age is. She wouldn't tell me. What? I'll give you her age. We ask if she used any narcotics. I mean, or consciousness altering substances. Did she drink a lot? Did she take drugs? And she was mum on that. Um, but she was very uncooperative, very stoic. And okay, so about 10 days later, she calls back because we walked out of there thinking it's a waste of time. And she said that a friend and two neighbors had witnessed events. Okay, we go back there. It was on, can't remember the name of the street. Doesn't matter. In Culver City, and the house is still there. It's been renovated, hopefully improved upon when she lived there. And we come back. The stench is still there. It's even hotter. And we're in the kitchen with her, and the cupboard flies open, and an iron skillet flies out of the cupboard, taking an elliptical, sort of an arc out of there. And we check for wires or kids or animals. Nope, nothing. And then when things got interesting, because we started taking pictures, we got some strange lights we couldn't explain. So eventually we decided to seal the house off from all external lighting, and we did that. And she said that when they played certain music that her kids liked, the phenomena would react. Now, she claimed there were three male entities. There were two small ones that would hold her down, and there was one big one that would accost her, that would rape her. And, what am I supposed to say? How can you prove it? You can't. So she had 4 children, each by a different man, 3 boys, and a little, very, very young girl who we never met. So we're listening to her talk, and the white lights are on, and sure enough, in this darkened bedroom, we start seeing lights zipping around the room. Lime green in color, and they look like something you'd see in a lava lamp, but they were moving quickly, and they're what I called corpuscular masses, for lack of a better term. And they were zipping around, and the room was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The record was playing what was the song from, Black Sabbath called Acrobat.
Oh.
Bad enough they had to listen to it, but we had to listen to it. And Doris was very evasive, and we took more pictures. And so this is where it got really bizarre. We obviously developed the picture taken by professional photographers with high-end cameras. Remember, this is 45 years ago. There was no digital technology, nothing. And so one of the pictures, it's on my website, you can see Doris sitting on a bed, and there's an arc completely going over her. She's framed by an arc of light. Now
I've seen that picture.
Yeah, we never saw an arc of light. And then another picture where she's out of the frame that's angled a little more to the right, where her chest of drawers were. You see arcs, and they're inverted to each other. One's going from top to top, one's going bottom to top, and they're crossing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's weird is and one more thing, we got one of the balls of light. It looks like a comet with a tail on it. And you see, problem was we couldn't tell where the object lights were coming from or going to. We had no reference in a dark room. So we put up poster boards on the walls and ceiling, with duct tapes. With a grid. Every poster board had a number in it and a magnetic orientation. So we'd assume that we could tell where the objects start from and finish, the speed at which they took, whatever, the vector change, and so. It was just we were there, lights, and we took pictures we couldn't get. At one point, the lights coalesced to the corner of the bedroom again, always lime green in color. God knows why. And they formed the apparition of a very large man, about 6.5, maybe a little feet taller. And we all saw it. It was far more than what's depicted in the movie. I mean, in Barry Conrad's video on, I think, an unknown encounter, or one of his other videos, he has a part of it on the entity case, and we had a special effects guy, and he did a really good job. He adhered to what we saw, what's to work with Barry Conrad then, but we saw in the entity case, you see a large apparition of the upper torso of a man. You could see the head and the brow ridge of the shoulders, the pectorals, the upper arms, and it faded away at the waist, and it was articulating. It moved as if in response to us being there. And, okay, so the apparition, we fired hundreds of photographs. We had 3 professional photographers. Not one of the pictures showed anything except the arcs of light. what? So when lights came on, I said, right. I told everyone, write down what you saw. Don't talk about it. Here's paper. Here's pencil. Write down what you saw. And they did, and everyone saw the same thing. Now here's the problem. Whatever it was not photogenic, but it was visible collectively to a group of 25 people, which makes no sense. There's no such thing as a collective hallucination. So what were we seeing? Or was there a form of energy present that was affecting our brains and making us see something in the optical region of our brain that didn't come through the eyes? We don't know. And then we got a call once, days later. We're back, and the poster boards were torn off on the floor. And she could have done it. She was a small woman, probably around my size. And she could have gotten on a tall ladder, ripped them off, but took the paint and the plaster with it. And why she would do it, we don't know. And she claimed that more and more things were happening, although the sexual assaults seemed to have stopped. And now in the movie and in the book, when one of Doris's sons, trying to come to her aid, he was thrown back by whatever it was, but it wasn't visible. And now this is what was really interesting. Doris, I said, had 3 male children, 2 younger ones and 1 older, larger guy. And there's a strange sort of psychosexual pathology going on in that environment. And she was drinking beer a lot. We didn't see drugs, but we could see and smell beer on her part. And the kids wanted nothing to do with us. They just wanted us to leave so they could play their music. But there was it's more than intriguing that the 3 male kids he had a dysfunctional relationship with, and there were 3 male entities, the largest of which was raping her. We couldn't prove it, just prove it. But from a scientist perspective, from a psychoanalytic perspective, it smacks more of an extraordinary case of, an Oedipal psychokinesis. Can't prove or disprove. Now, so we had another session. We were there for over 10 weeks. We did our work with her. We're in that pitch black room again, and we said, if you hear, do something. And suddenly the poster boards are ripped from the ceiling and fly at Doris and hit her in the face. And then we said to show it again, and another one ripped off and flew but fell at her feet. Okay. So Doris finally got up the ability, both financially and emotionally, to move. So she left that place and she moved to a place which was Culver City. It's Braddock Drive. That's where she used to live, Braddock Drive. So she left there and moved from Culver City to Carson. And it took a while to find her. Frank DiFilippo, who ended up writing the Entity book and screenplay, he found her. And we went to a new place, and the water turning on and off, banging noises, zipping lights, and we're seated in a circle, and all of a sudden a vase flies across the room, missing everyone. It shatters in the middle of the room, spreading its water and its dirt all everywhere. And then she moved again. Let me back up. Before we left, we had a condenser mic on one of those recorders, audio recorders, Sony recorders I had. And we can hear people talking, and all of a sudden we hear labored breathing, and it is approaching the recorder mic, the condenser mic in the system. And we can hear after, coupled with the breathing, is a footstep, and the footstep would drag. A footstep, then a footstep would drag. It was like an old mummy movie from Universal.
Yeah.
And then the recorder, for the first and only time, turned itself off of its own accord. Okay, so Doris finally moved from there. Now, what's important, she didn't talk to her neighbors of what was going on with her, because she realized they would think she was crazy, and God knows what they would do. They knew nothing about her. But not long after she moved into this place in Carson, her neighbors, flanking her on both left and right sides, began having poltergeist activity going on, as if the effect was proximity, that it was radiant in some fashion. Now, every time I asked Doris medical questions, she just changed the subject or she just wouldn't answer. So she finally moved from Carson, I think, to San Bernardino or something. Things continued there. Frank Diefel later went out and met with her. And then she moved to Texas. And then we lost track of her, and I found out about 7 or 8 years ago that she died, I think in the late 80s or early 90s somewhere, and of cardiopulmonary arrest, which is, I mean, but she wasn't ill with any one thing. So that was just on her death certificate. So I don't know.
Do you think she was seizure prone?
Well, it's hard to say. If I had to make a bet, I'll say that. If I had to make a bet, I'll say that she was. But again, I can't prove. You know, one of her kids was interviewed. Well, the second oldest was interviewed by Javier Ortega on GhostTheory.com, and I read the interview, and he must have contradicted himself a dozen times during the short interview. So either he doesn't remember what happened because he was very young, or from what we've heard from other people, he sort of has some substance abuse problems himself.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know. We can't prove. All they know, Javier Ortega was going to write a book as a prequel to the Entity case. And he was working on it. Let me read some of it. And then he left L.A. some years, I think in 2015, moved to New York with his new wife, and I haven't heard from him since. Nothing about the book. I don't know what. Maybe he couldn't get a publisher. Maybe Fox claims they own the rights in perpetuity on the case, which is a lot of garbage because you can't, and they don't. And
So what
there have
would
been.
be fair? What would be fair to say about the Entity case that you weren't dealing with a disembodied spirit in the sense that people might think of ghosts or demons. You were dealing with poltergeist activity that was caused by Doris.
Yes, but
Yeah.
but I see it's an Oedipal situation. Strange, obtuse psychosexual relationship between a mother and her male children,
Mhm.
and also it could be between a little girl and the husband or the father. But obviously, if I wish we had the portal instrumentation that we do now. Now we do know that where she used to live in Culver City, it was a high magnetic basalt area, and it has a high piezoelectric nature to it, which should have contributed to what had transpired there. But why not everywhere? Because she was the right person in the right place at the right time, and the result was, well, we saw the result. So it's an untestable hypothesis. But if someone put a gun to my head and asked me what I think happened, I don't believe the evidence supports a discarnate intelligence as what was responsible for her rapes. I mean, you should have seen me when she said that. Myself and Carrie, our eyes just rolled back, going, "Oh God, she's a little couple of flights short of a Happy Meal."
Yeah.
And today, in today's weird, paranormal, absurd culture, people, oh yeah, sure, she was raped. Yeah, no problem. And people just make up their own stories. They don't care.
Now,
So,
I think you mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, and certainly in your book, the number of thousands of cases you've investigated. What percentage would you say of those cases can be explainable by some kind of poltergeist activity, similar to what Doris was experiencing, versus, we're dealing with some kind of incarnate, departed soul?
well, let's look at the Hollymont case, 1976, after the Entity, and it's area of Hollywood. If you take Argyle and Franklin is across the street. You go north from Franklin, it dead ends and it turns to Hollymont, wraps around the hill. The house in question, which we got to live in for about 10 days, is 6221 Hollymont. Well, we now know, before I describe some of what happened, we now know that two earthquake faults intersect almost directly under the house. And there's a shallow river where there's your strong geomagnetic forces, because the earthquake faults up there aren't locked. They do move very minutely, but they move enough to create, piezoelectric effects in the stone rock. So that's there. The shallow river's there. You could go to the basement and hear it. And the stuff that was going on there, things flying around, disembodied voices, objects appearing and disappearing, ports, fire spontaneously breaking out. At one point, I was making a glass of iced tea. I put it down on the sink to get some lemon to put in it. I turned back around. It was gone. I found it through two locked doors that I just locked, and I was there alone. Um, it's going to be an entirely separate chapter in the new book because we've learned a lot more about it. The place was pretty well degenerated over the year, water erosion. Apparently, it was somewhat gutted, and they rebuilt it. It's got new plumbing and new wiring, but while we were there, it's discussed in I think the first chapter of my book, but there'll be more of it. That it's what a coincidence that this incredible case is subject to strong geomagnetic forces. Gee. And while we were there last in 2008, had a Pelican case with my gear in it. Now, Pelican cases are extremely hard. They're very difficult to damage. They're almost like steel. So I put the thing down, got my instruments out, and came back when we were going to leave to pack up my instruments, and I picked up the case where it was sitting on top of a couch, a sofa, and something had carved into the bottom of the case. It was a lazy R, a backwards R. I thought, what? If someone did that, we would have heard them. He would have taken a hammer and chisel to do that. A knife wouldn't do it. But we didn't hear anything. And then, wait a minute. Underneath that house, connecting two other homes on the hill, probably made during Prohibition, were these old tunnels. And this neighbor to the east, a man named Dexter Gray, was renovating his house, and he was leaning against a shelving unit, and it cantilevered into the wall. And he found these steps going down. He was there with a friend and his neighbor, and they found a homemade grave with a headstone. It said Regina, I think 1922.
Oh, what's happening?
So
entity.
what?
Just the microphone noise. Was that somebody
Me.
moving? Was that you, Dan, moving your microphone or?
I just moved in the chair a little bit.
Really? Okay. Good. Well, we don't have a fourth party on the line. I guess.
Yeah, we might have Dr. Taft come investigate what's going on here in Olympia, if so.
That was just Dan. So
Right.
keep going. Keep going.
But anyway, the case, it's amazing. And okay, let's go to another great case. In 2005, 2006, now it's called the Oman House, what I call the Cielo Drive case. And it's in 2005, I was brought up there by a friend of mine who was hired to help promote a movie that David Oman had made based on his experiences in the houses. Anyway, in 2002, David Oman's father was a builder, a realty developer. They built a house on Cielo Drive, not far from where the Sharon Tate murders happened, about 200 feet away. And when they were drilling to put in the, iron ingots or whatever they will, iron railings for this, their magnetometers were driven crazy because the magnetic field up there is so intense. They had to drill blind, and they found old magma chambers.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little spooky because that means that a long time ago the place almost became a volcano.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, went there, and it's on my web. There's two articles on my website. One's called Cielo Drive Conversions, the Ultimate Field Laboratory. And it helped us consolidate a lot of what we know. It clarified a lot of issues. But I went there, I think, 21 times over the course of a year, and I got sick every time I went there. I'd end up in the hospital the next day. So I learned don't go to
Don't go there.
The geomagnetic field was way, way above, and it was oscillating. What's in frequency and amplitude, polarity shifting, and our bodies don't like change at this level. And so, it wasn't good. But we had measurements that were just unprecedented. We've never seen some of the measurements there, and there's no power on this earth that would get me to go back there because I don't feel like going to the ER again. It was,
So do you
The other
think
people went there; they felt nothing. You know.
do you think Barry, that when you look at the again, I mentioned the eggs or the random number generators. I think it's the is it
Hmm.
Consciousness Project? Is that what it's called? Consciousness Project.
I
I
don't remember off the top of my head.
I haven't visited the site for a while, but anyway, what they discovered or what they argued is that the random number generators would diverge
Would
statistically.
react before a major political thing on the earth. Yeah, major
Yeah,
event.
a major
Hmm.
event, can loosely be defined as a very emotional event. They looked at
Okay.
9/11, for
Yeah,
instance,
a major war thing, disaster. You know.
and so that kind of jives with what the Stargate concluded. I believe that was Stargate that said that the abilities seem to be amplified by emotion.
Right.
And in your book, of course, you're dealing with a lot of emotion, a lot of
Hmm.
especially with the with Dorothy, the case there with the sexual tension, the high emotion,
Right.
the Oedipal
Hmm.
complex. I mean, it doesn't get to be more of a perfect storm than that. So,
Hmm.
what is your opinion then? And I can't help but I actually liked in your book where you mentioned the women that you'd encountered, because I have a feeling that is a variable in there, and I had a feeling that's why you mentioned it, because there's a string, there's that sexual tension, that attractiveness, that
Hmm.
magnetism, whatever you want to call it. So you have what you're talking about right now is the electromagnetism, the measurable things. But is it, in your opinion, true that if you combine the human emotion variable along with the earth, the measurable earth uh, changes or different strengths of magnetic fields, whatever, can you develop a perfect storm where you either open a portal to these things, or the human mind is, ripe for creating some of these things, or is that a distinction without a difference? What is your opinion on what is being created, or is
Well,
being opened?
the problem is somewhat simple. Well, not really simple. The okay. My belief is that there's reality is in some way similar to a hologram. It's holonomic.
Right.
And what I mean by that is the events, information about the past still exists. The information about the future already exists, not the events, the
Hmm.
information related. So if we can access that information, we can see things at a distance or through time. And yet it seems to be that the mechanism by which all this occurs is the way the localized geomagnetic field affects us.
Hmm.
And if you shield it, the phenomena is not electromagnetic, but the way it couples with us is through our biomagnetic field.
Right.
So see, this is again, this is very complicated. Well, then this suggests that the future is already there. Yes, it does, and that means that free will may be a misnomer, maybe a fallacy, that we might discover the future is as immutable as the past is. We know we can't change the past. Doesn't stop people from trying to do it. But what if the future is the same? What if we're already there doing what we're doing? And I mean, let me give you some examples. Back in 1970, this was the end of my, undergraduate college year, and I met this beautiful girl at school named Sharon, and she looks like this actor. I can't remember the. Anyway, doesn't matter. Um, Beautiful, dirty blonde hair, blue eyes, stunning. We were dating, and everything was great. Now she lived in Northridge. I lived in Beverly Hills. So uh, I didn't mind going out there. Gas was cheap. I had a great car. Who cares? So we're dating, and then I get to having a dream, and the dream was always the same. In the dream, I'm in the back seat of a car. Couldn't tell whose car it was. I see Sharon in the passenger seat. I see someone driving with dark hair, which then I had. And we turned down the street to get to her house, and suddenly a bigger car comes flying out of nowhere and hits us, and crash and metal and fire and glass. It's horrible. And the dream kept occurring. So I said, I better tell Sharon. And she had a reaction, all right, but not the reaction I expected. She thought I was making it up to avoid dating because I lived in West LA and she lived in Northridge, which is 28 miles away. Big deal. Gas was what, 20 cents a gallon? Who cares? I had a Z28 Camaro. Have fun.
Yeah.
So I said, look, I can't do it. Why? Because I want to die in a car with you, with anyone. I don't want to. And she said, yeah, you got really angry, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I understand. So we stopped dating. And sometime later, she started dating someone else. When they're in his car, driving to her parents' house in this area of Northridge, a big car comes flying out, hits them. Her boyfriend's killed instantly, and she's badly injured.
Oh.
So what if I had coaxed her to come live with me in L.A.? Would that have prevented it, or would it not have prevented it? And another incident, 1975. So this girl I was involved with, we're together, and I had a dream that I'm piloting a 747. They just came into service a few years earlier. Their safety record was unblemished. So in the dream, I'm piloting it. I knew it was TWA, and I knew we were on approach to South Africa. Don't ask me how I knew that. So I'm flying the plane like the captain, and suddenly all the instruments go dark or just go dead, and we're falling like a lead balloon, and we hit an explosion, boom, and I fly out of bed, taking my girlfriend with me to the floor. What happened? I told her. She goes, what? But the 747s have never crashed. I go, I know. Well, what was it? I said, well, 747 on approach to South Africa, the TWA. But I didn't know what day, what week, what month, at what time, what the flight number was. So what am I going to do? Stop telling TWA to stop traveling there? I didn't do anything. A few days later, the first 747 crashed on approach to South Africa. It was a TWA. So if this happened today and I'd call the FAA during the dreams, I'd be arrested. They would think I'd blown the plane up.
Right.
How much, how much freedom do we have? And then in 1977, the girl I ever dated that I could have married. Everything was great. Poltergeist agent, that's how I met her. Long story short, we met in February of 1977. And everything was great. We were together, and suddenly the dreams started. And all the dreams said to me was that on July 22nd, the relationship ends. I didn't know why, or I just knew that it ends on that date. I thought, oh, this isn't good. I'm not going to tell her. She'll interpret this as my wanting to leave the relationship, which I didn't want to do. So all I knew. That's all I knew. Weeks went by, the months, we're approaching. Now, this girl had a strong interest in the paranormal, but beyond the psychic stuff, not really. And I'm saying this will be obvious in a moment. So I wake up, and she's under the covers. She won't come out. And she's sobbing. Why didn't you help me? And I went, what? What are you talking about? Why didn't you help me? I go, with what? When the room lit up. I go, what room? The bedroom. I go, what? What are you talking about? The room lit up. She found herself being levitated out of bed, and suddenly she found herself in a round metal room on a stainless steel brushed aluminum table, being held down in her neck, her wrists, her ankles, and her abdomen very hard. These little guys with no hair, reptilian skin, black eyes, no ears, no nose, and they were doing terrible things and cutting her and just terrible. And I said to her, she's like, do you know anything about UFO abduction? She goes, what? UFO? No interest. I finally got her out under the covers. Took an hour and a half. Why didn't you help me? I go, I don't, so she gets up. Okay. Now, it was shocking. She comes up from under the covers. She's bleeding from one of her eyes. She's bleeding from her nose, bleeding from her ear, bleeding from her uterus, but she wasn't menstruating, and bleeding from her rectum.
Wow.
And around her neck, her ankles, her wrists, and her abdomen are bruises like she'd been held too tightly too long, black and blue marks. I'm going, what? And also, the clock had stopped at like 2:45 or 2:30 in the morning, and it had not restarted. So, she just kind of freaked. Oh, there were little chunks of her skin on her back taken out. Looked like a little melon baller was used or something. And she completely freaked out, never recovered. Now, the neighbors, knowing nothing about this, was coming and going over the next few days, and she just couldn't do anything. She was really messed up. The neighbor said, "Did you see that thing over here the other night?" I go, "What?" Huge, like a really bright red-orange thing. It was massive, and our power went out. I go, "No." So they saw it. I didn't see it because I was sound asleep. So they took her and they left me. And if that hadn't occurred, whatever it was, we would have been married. My life would be so different. I can't imagine it. Now, think about this. The women that I tend to attract either think I'm crazy or they make me look normal. So either way, it's a dead end.
Yeah.
I've met really beautiful women, but okay, you're crazy, and okay, well, maybe they think I am, but then if they make me look normal, thank you very much. I have to leave, get back to the earth. I just, I've dedicated my life to this because it keeps intruding in every way possible. It doesn't stop. It just keeps happening. Now, I almost died in 2015 and 16. I won't go into depth. It's not important. But what's odd is that my parents passed away 2009 and 10. And since that happened, a lot of weird psychokinetic events have been happening around me. Not the microscopic. I'm talking macroscopic.
Right.
A pair of shoes disappeared. A suit disappeared. 3 large bottles of medication disappeared. 3 little pills disappeared. My cell phone disappeared. Something took off my seatbelt in my car, tied it in knot, and put it back on the proper hooks on the or locking points inside. I came out. There was a knot tied to the seatbelt.
That's bizarre.
I didn't do it. So who did it and when? And then after I almost died, I'm still somewhat recuperating from some of that. Staying with a friend, no paranormal experiences in his life, just real normal. I move in, disembodied voices, strange anomalies. Okay, then one point, I'm laying down, go to sleep. I feel warm breath on my left cheek. I hadn't even gone to sleep yet. Warm breath. I hear a female voice going, "Hey, Barry, remember me?" Huh? What? I jump up, and these red lights flying around the room. And then I had to move to another place, further out in the middle of nowhere. And I think, well, nothing will happen here. Wrong again. It's apparitions, luminous anomalies. A couple of weeks ago, I woke up at 3:17 in the morning. I don't know why. And instead of being alone in my own bed with the door closed, I found myself, my right cheek, my face, my head was resting on a woman's left breast. And what? I wake up, what? Who? She had more melanin in her skin than me. She was younger than me. High brow ridge, couldn't see the eye color, long, straight, very dark hair. And what? And I started to reach for the lamp on the table next to my bed, and her voice boomed out, "Don't turn the light on. Don't turn the light on." I go, what? Turned it on. There was nothing there. But her body odor was. It wasn't a bad odor. Everyone's odor is different depending on their particular biochemistry. The odor of her was not mine or anyone else's I've ever smelled. So what was that, and why was that happening? What did I experience? I don't know. But I'm 70 years old. This stuff isn't supposed to be happening to me anymore. Why is it? I mean, why me? Why now? That's the point.
Well, there's another.
What does it mean?
That I have is that why is there? A lot of the things there's some instances that you've described in your book that were of very dire, very strong emotional events and dire consequences, particularly the friend on the stairway who was apparently being strangled or potentially hung.
Well, that was the Ramirez case. No, no, no. That was the was it the hang? That wait, which case was wait?
I
Let me
can look
think.
it up.
Oh, that was San Pedro. That was San Pedro back in 1989.
So that's very dramatic, and my point is
Yep.
that, but a lot of it is very, what's the word? Very petty, very trickster-like. It's just like some entity or intelligence is just so bored out of their minds that they got to throw a frying pan across the room to get your attention. I mean, what's your thought about why and tying your seatbelt in knots? Why, where is this energy coming from? Why is it so
Okay, if
petty
we
and
don't
thoughtless?
know what's doing it, okay, if we don't know what's doing it and how it's being done, the why is like, huh?
Right.
Yeah, if we don't know what's doing it, what could untie my seatbelt attached to the left of my driver's seat and do that and put it back? Forget about how it did it. What did it, and how did it do it? The why comes later.
And I realize we're not to that point yet, unfortunately. It reminds
I mean,
the
if I
skin.
live a couple thousand years, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, when Jeff Wheatcraft was repeatedly attacked in the San Pedro case.
Right.
Now, what's interesting, this isn't in my book because I didn't know this up until the time. Jackie Hernandez was living a hellish existence because she was married to a terrible man and all kinds of problems with the family, and she was 2 young children and alone and was trying to live, and so she didn't like Jeff at all. I mean, at all. She disliked him. She thought he was skeptical, of course, which he was, and but whatever. What do you? I don't know. It's whatever. And she disliked him. Now, what's weird? Phenomena kept attacking Jeff. What a surprise! When Jackie couldn't stand him, and we were on a current affair, some show. Oh, I forgot what show. And I tried to convince the producer, the woman. I said, not that it mattered, but it was the female producer. I said, do you understand that Jackie has an intense hatred of Jeff, and the phenomena keeps attacking Jeff? Don't you find that unusual? She goes, what do you mean? Oh, so she's telling the ghost what to do. I go, there's no ghost. It's Jackie. And then, well, okay. So then the whole thing is Jackie moves out of that little bungalow in San Pedro, and new people move into it knowing nothing about what had happened there. We hadn't written our material up yet for publication anywhere. And they start having word experiences, similar but not identical to Jackie's. Now, some crews went there with beta cams to do videotaping, news crews, and they're in the house. Their equipment kept dying with brand new batteries, as ours did all too often. But what's amazing is that the a couple times Jackie visited Barry Conrad when he lived in Studio City in his apartment, and she stayed with him when there was too many problems going on with her life. I don't think the kids were there, but I'm not positive. And then other girls would show up, and he'd throw Jackie out, bring the girls in, and he would just back and forth with her. She's getting really pissed at her, really upset. And then what happens? Psychokinetic activity starts occurring in Barry Conrad's apartment. What a coincidence. She's angry and bitter at Barry for the way he's dealing with her, and the phenomenon starts attacking Barry. What? Well, now we understand the dynamic. It didn't make sense before. Now it does. Barry, all women go crazy over Barry Conrad. Looks like Elvis. He's tall, good looking, blue eyes, black hair. Women love him. And it's great, But he was playing with fire and didn't even know. They were experiencing the psychokinetic manifestation of Jackie's anger. And how many times how many coincidences happen before you realize this isn't a coincidence? This isn't chance. How many do you have to make you think, what is this? You don't know. And that's the problem. For all we know is until we could even if we could make it happen, which is what the Entity movie tried to depict, we could capture the phenomena in a controlled environment and make it occur under conditions we could monitor it. And even if that occurred, people would say you faked it, especially nowadays with all the technology we have. And this is another problem with the entire field, because anything and everything can be faked. People say, "Oh, well, that's fake." Yeah, it's not real.
Right. They don't accept evidence because of that.
Right.
I want to
Yeah, it's all
interject one thing.
CGI.
Yeah, I want to interject something here that I
Sure.
told Dr. Taff we'd keep him 90 minutes, and we've gone 15 minutes beyond that. So I'm wondering, and I think there's a sense that there are a lot of other things we could talk about, particularly maybe in the UFO area. What would you say to having a part two of this discussion at a time and place that works for you? Would you be
Yeah,
up for that?
no problem. No problem.
Okay.
Just let me know what works best for you, and we'll deal with that.
Well, now we know that the technology is workable. That's
Right.
always the
Right.
crapshoot. Well, I want to thank you for being on with us today. Um, you're just a fountain of information about a lot of topics that both Dave and I are interested in, and I think our listeners will be very interested in. So, once again, thanks for being a
No,
guest.
it's my
Dave,
pleasure.
Dave, do you have any final comments you want to make before we?
I just want to make one thing instead. Oh, okay, Dave. I'm sure you're talking about me. Never mind.
Yeah, I just want to say, of course, thank you. And I have the feeling I could stay up all night with Dr. Taff here and just throw stuff at him, and he'd be able to answer everything, and it'd be fun. But I do realize we need to, we're pushing up against about 2 hours here, so we need to, I guess, wrap this particular episode up. And I do want Barry to get a chance to tell us again about his website. It's barrytaff.net. Is that correct?
Right.
And
Correct.
then also
Barrytaff.net. Right.
it's TAFF, and
Right.
people should go check that out. I was just browsing through it here while we were talking. It looks interesting. I'm going to check that out later too. And your new book will be available when, and what is it called?
I can't tell you. I'm still working on it. It's going to create a lot of controversy. A lot of people are going to be upset with it.
Well, that's what
because
we
it sort of cuts through a lot of the garbage and tries to make people look. This is real, and once you pass the garbage and the disinformation, the misinformation, what you're left with is astounding.
And we need more of that, in my opinion, and I'm sure Dan would agree that that's what we need to cut through the crap. We need to stop worrying about what people think of us, what's going to be said, and just tell them, because you have the experience to be able to speak to the reality as much as you can see and any of us can determine from what we have, and we need that. So I applaud you for doing that, and
And we look forward to reading your new book.
Yeah, I think you'll find it a little different than the first one. I can't even get into it because if I start talking about it, someone else will put it up first.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Gotta
All
be
right.
careful.
Thank you very much, and
My
hopefully
pleasure.
we'll get to talk again in the future.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for having me on, guys.
Yeah, good night.
Thanks,
Good
Barry.
night. Good night.
Night.
Good night. Bye-bye.